What happens when the school's most feared bully picks the wrong person to mess with? When he shoves a boy, expecting him to back down and walk away, but instead, something explosive happens. Just wait and see. Westwood Academy, a private school in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, is a place for the rich, the privileged, and if you ask some students here, the right kind of people. Right now, every eye in the school's main hallway is fixed on a scene no one could have predicted. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Jamal Carter had just turned the corner of the hallway. He wasn't thinking about trouble or drama at all. He just wanted to get to his AP Physics class in 5 minutes, where a test was waiting for him. Jamal, 17 years old, is the son of Solomon Carter, an older black janitor who works at a supermarket in the Eastwood neighborhood, an Atlanta suburb. But the universe seemed to have other plans for him today, because standing in the middle of the hallway, right in front of him, like a villain from a cheap movie, was Ethan Pierce. Ethan, standing 6'3", with messy brown hair, built like a football linebacker, and worst of all, arrogant to an infuriating degree. He's the son of Richard Pierce, a wealthy real estate tycoon from the upscale Buckhead area, with money, connections, and a habit of treating others like trash beneath his feet. Jamal didn't belong at Westwood Academy, at least not in the eyes of people like Ethan. The school sat on a tree-lined street, with grand red brick buildings, manicured green lawns, and a parking lot full of expensive cars Jamal had only seen on TV. The students here wore crisp uniforms, carried designer bags, and talked about lavish vacations like it was nothing. Jamal was different. He came from Eastwood, a working-class neighborhood, with dusty roads, weathered wooden houses, and the sound of a bus horn blaring every morning as he left home to attend the school on an academic scholarship. He walked in with worn-out sneakers and a beat-up backpack he'd been using since 9th grade, holding a lunchbox his dad had packed, usually a piece of fried chicken and some white rice. He wasn't the type to draw attention. Tall and lanky, with dark brown skin, sharp eyes that usually stayed fixed on the ground to avoid prying stares, Jamal always tried to blend into the crowd. But today, as he stepped through the polished stone hallway, he couldn't stay invisible anymore. Ethan stood there, blocking his path, with his 3 loyal cronies behind him. Dylan, blonde with a sleazy grin, Caleb, big and quiet, and Travis, scrawny, but with cunning eyes. They lined up like a living wall, causing students around them to slow their steps. A few stopped completely, phones in hand, ready to record. At Westwood Academy, when Ethan Pierce targeted someone, everyone knew a show was about to start. Jamal didn't want any part of it. He gripped his backpack straps tighter, trying to keep his breathing steady. He just wanted to get to class, take his test, and go home to his dad. But Ethan had had his eye on him for a while, maybe because Jamal was one of the few black students here, or because he'd once embarrassed Ethan in physics class by answering a question right when Ethan got it wrong, making the whole class laugh. Or maybe it was just because Ethan liked picking on people like Jamal, those who didn't belong in his world. Jamal knew it. He'd heard dozens of taunts from Ethan, ignored months of jabs about his dad, about his poor neighborhood. But today, something felt different. He could sense it in the air, a tension simmering, waiting to erupt. Solomon, his dad, was the one who'd taught him how to face guys like Ethan. He'd been an amateur boxer, with calloused hands and stories of fights from his youth that Jamal always loved hearing. Every evening, in the backyard of their Eastwood home, under an old oak tree, Solomon hung up a homemade punching bag and taught Jamal how to stand firm, how to throw a fast, strong punch, how to stay calm no matter how big the opponent was. "You don't have to fight over everything," he'd say, his voice deep and warm, "but when you do, make it count." Jamal didn't like violence, but he carried those lessons in his heart like a shield. They were his dad's way of reminding him he had worth, no matter what anyone thought. Dylan's mocking laugh echoed through the space, mixing with the murmurs of the growing crowd of students around them. Ethan, with his smug, lopsided grin, still leaned against the locker, tilting his head to eye Jamal like he was an easy target. "Well, well," he repeated, his voice dropping low, dripping with mockery. "Look who we have here. The janitor's kid must have taken a wrong turn. You sure you're in the right place, Jamal?" His words were like a knife, sharp and deliberate, slicing straight into Jamal's pride. The crowd started to stir. A few students paused, turning to look, while others inched closer, just enough to catch every word but too scared to step in. No one spoke up. At Westwood Academy, it was an unwritten rule. When Ethan Pierce singled someone out, you either watched or walked away. Jamal felt the stares boring into him, like needles pricking his skin. He'd heard these words before, from Ethan, from his crew, from the whispers behind his back in classrooms, or the cafeteria. Janitor's kid, scholarship trash, doesn't belong here. He'd tried to ignore them, tried to keep his cool like his dad, Solomon, had taught him. But today, something inside him was cracking. Jamal took a deep breath, pushing down the heat rising in his chest. He forced his voice out, calm but firm. "Move, Ethan. I don't have time to mess with you today." His words weren't a plea, but a clear demand, like he was talking to a misbehaving kid. But to Ethan, that was the biggest mistake Jamal could have made. The grin on his face widened, his eyes flashing with a dangerous glint. "Oh, you think you can talk to me like that?" Ethan stepped closer, his towering figure casting a dark shadow over Jamal. "You don't belong here, Carter. This school isn't for—" He didn't finish. Ethan's hand shot out, shoving Jamal's shoulder hard, a warning, a challenge. Jamal stumbled back a step, but didn't fall. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a few gasps slipping out. He straightened up, eyes locked on Ethan. "Move," Jamal repeated, his voice lower, almost a growl. But Ethan didn't stop. He laughed loud, shoving again, harder, like he wanted Jamal to crash down in front of everyone. "You deaf kid, I said you don't push me." Jamal cut in, his voice now ice cold, his eyes sparking with a warning. Ethan didn't bother to heed. Ethan smirked, stepping even closer, so close Jamal could smell the expensive cologne on him. "Or what? Gonna run crying to the teachers? Go ahead, little kid, this isn't your place." And then, as if to end the show, Ethan shoved a third time, harder than ever, his big hand slamming into Jamal's chest like he meant to send him flying. That was Ethan's biggest mistake. A collective ooh rose from the crowd as Jamal stepped back half a pace, but this time, he didn't stay still. He lifted his head, staring straight into Ethan's eyes, and said, his voice calm yet chilling, "You really don't want to do this." Ethan burst out laughing, the sound bouncing off the hallway walls. "Or what? Gonna run crying to the teachers? Go ahead, kid." He didn't finish before shoving again, his hand swinging hard like he wanted to slam Jamal into the floor. But this time, Jamal didn't budge. The crowd held its breath. Before Ethan could register what was happening, Jamal moved. He sidestepped, dodging the shove effortlessly. Then in a split second, he pivoted, grabbed Ethan's wrist, and used his own momentum to yank him forward. With a lightning-fast twist, Jamal lifted his shoulder and flipped Ethan over it. A loud bam rang out as Ethan, the 6'3", muscle-bound guy, crashed back first onto the hard stone floor. He lay there, eyes wide, mouth gaping, unable to believe what had just happened. It took just 10 seconds, 10 short seconds, for the school's most feared bully to hit the ground at Jamal's feet. The hallway went dead silent. No one dared breathe too loud. Ethan sprawled on the floor, clutching his back, his face flushed with pain and humiliation. Jamal stood tall, breathing steady, his cold eyes still fixed on him. He didn't say another word, just quietly adjusted his backpack straps. The crowd stayed stunned, some starting to whisper, others raising their phones, hands shaking in disbelief. Dylan, Caleb and Travis stood frozen behind, too scared to step forward. For the first time ever, Ethan Pierce wasn't the one on top. He wasn't the king of Westwood Academy anymore. He was just a guy sprawled on the floor, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes, his pride shattered into dust. The bam from the fall still echoed, like thunder in a clear sky, snapping the crowd out of their stunned silence. Jamal Carter stood motionless in the hallway, his breathing steady, his icy gaze sweeping over the hulking guy sprawled at his feet. Ethan clutched his back, his face burning red, his strained eyes brimming with pain and shame. He tried rolling to his side, lips twitching like he wanted to protest, but no sound came out. For the first time, the school's notorious bully wasn't the looming threat everyone feared. He was now just a broken figure, crumpled on the cold stone floor, shattered like the dominance he'd once held. Then, as if someone flipped a switch, the hallway erupted. "Oh my God!" a girl's voice screamed from the crowd, shattering the stillness. Laughter broke out right after, scattered at first, then swelling fast, like an unstoppable wave. "Did you see that? He took Ethan down," a curly-haired kid cheered, pointing at Jamal. Scattered claps started up, quickly turning into a roaring round of applause. Phones shot up everywhere, flashes popping off, capturing every second of the unbelievable scene. Jamal adjusted his backpack straps and stepped over Ethan like he was just a minor obstacle. "Told you," he said, his voice calm as if stating the obvious, then kept walking toward his class. Ethan stayed down, hands pressing the floor, trying to sit up, his face now purple with shame. Dylan, Caleb, and Travis stood paralyzed behind him, their eyes wild with confusion, unsure what to do. They glanced at each other, then down at Ethan, but none dared step forward to help. The hallway had turned into a chaotic stage. "World star!" a guy yelled from the back of the crowd, holding his phone up to film Ethan crawling upright. Laughter swelled again, louder, sharper. Jamal didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew everything had just changed, not just for Ethan, but for himself too. By lunchtime, Westwood Academy was buzzing. The incident, filmed from dozens of angles, had spread across social media like wildfire. In student group chats, on Instagram, TikTok, captions popped up non-stop. "Janitor's kid knocks out Ethan Pierce. Who the heck is Jamal Carter?" Ethan got flipped in 10 seconds flat. The video went up with the title, "Rich Kid Humiliated at Westwood Academy," racking up hundreds of comments from students and strangers alike. "I swear I've never seen Ethan flop that hard," one wrote. "Is Jamal a ninja, or what?" another added, with a crying laughing emoji. In the cafeteria, it was all anyone talked about. Jamal sat alone at his usual corner table, opening the lunch his dad had packed, fried chicken and white rice. But this time, he felt the different stares. A few students, like Lila Monroe, a girl from his AP physics class, watched him with quiet admiration. "I had no idea Jamal was that tough," Lila whispered to her friend, sneaking a glance his way. People who'd never spoken to him were now buzzing about him. "He's on scholarship, right? How's he that good at fighting?" one asked. "Probably from movies," another guessed. But they all agreed on one thing. Jamal had just done what no one dared, taken down Ethan Pierce in front of the whole school. But not everyone was thrilled. Ethan, after dragging himself out of the hallway with Dylan's reluctant help, had disappeared into the nurse's office. When he came back at the end of the day, his face was still flushed, fists clenched tight. He didn't speak, but his eyes said it all: anger, humiliation, and an unspoken vow. He sat at the back of the cafeteria, hearing his crew mutter about the spreading video. "I can't believe it," Caleb mumbled, voice low. "Jamal just smashed him," Travis added. But Ethan only growled, slamming his hand on the table. "This isn't over," he said, so quiet almost no one heard. To Ethan, it wasn't just a fall, it was the collapse of the empire he'd built over years at Westwood Academy. For Jamal, he didn't care about the noise. After school, he took the bus back to Eastwood, sitting by the window, watching the dusty roads roll by. At home, he told Solomon about it. The old man with gray hair sat in his worn armchair, coffee in hand, listening with a faint smile. "You did good," he said, voice warm and deep. "But watch out, Jamal. Guys like that don't take losing easy." Jamal nodded, a strange feeling growing inside. He didn't want to be the center of attention, didn't want to be the guy who took down Ethan Pierce, but he knew, from this moment on, nothing at Westwood Academy would ever be the same. At Westwood Academy, Ethan Pierce had once been the face of power and arrogance, the kid others avoided, the one teachers grumbled about but never challenged. But after that incident, that image was gone, smashed to pieces. He'd spent the afternoon on a stiff bed in the nurse's office, his back aching like it had been snapped, his mind spinning from the whispers about the viral video. When he finally stepped out of the main building, the schoolyard was fading into dusk, but in his head, it all still roared. The laughter, the cheers, and the stinging social media headline, "Rich Kid Humiliated by Janitor's Son," his fists clenched, nails digging into his palms until they bled. The humiliation burned like a tidal wave. He couldn't stomach that Jamal Carter, a scholarship kid from working-class Eastwood, had made him a laughingstock. It cut deep into his pride, and Ethan swore it wouldn't end like this. That night, at his lavish Buckhead home, Ethan sat in the sprawling living room, its glass wall overlooking a pool shimmering with lights. Dylan, Caleb, and Travis sat around the table, the air thick with tension. Dylan scrolled his phone, muttering, "This video's got over 10,000 views already, Ethan. Some kid even made a meme of your fall." Ethan snarled, slamming his hand down, rattling the soda cans. "I don't need to hear that," he snapped, voice hoarse with rage. Caleb, usually quiet, spoke up. "But Jamal, he's legit strong. What are you gonna do?" Ethan turned, eyes flashing with menace. I'm gonna make him regret ever crossing me." He stood, pacing the room, his mind churning with revenge. Ethan had spent years building his rep at Westwood Academy, making students fear him, teachers respect him, even the principal bending to his dad Richard Pierce's influence. Now, it all crumbled, because of a 10-second flip. He replayed Jamal's cold stare as he stepped over him. That calm told you. It was a knife twisting in his ego. He hadn't just been physically beaten, he'd lost his king of the school status he'd always flaunted. There was only one way to get it back: make Jamal Carter pay. By morning, Westwood Academy was still abuzz. The video wasn't just in student chats anymore, it hit Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, with a new caption: "Poor kid takes down rich brat at elite Atlanta school." People weren't just talking about Ethan's fall, they were obsessed. In hallways, the cafeteria, even classrooms, Jamal Carter's name was everywhere. "I bet Jamal's been training since he was a kid," one said during break. "Did you see how he flipped Ethan, straight out of an action flick?" Another chimed in, eyes gleaming. Students who'd never glanced at Jamal now wanted to chat. A group even invited him to their lunch table, asking, "Where'd you learn to fight? Teach me." Jamal just gave a faint smile, shaking his head. "I'm not free." But not everyone liked the shift. Ethan stormed into school, face dark, eyes scanning the crowd like a predator. He heard the whispers, caught the sneaky glances, felt the change in how people treated him. Before, the halls hushed when he passed. Now, giggles trailed behind. He gritted his teeth, hands balling so tight his knuckles whitened. During break, he dragged Dylan, Caleb, and Travis to a secluded spot near the football field. "Listen up," he said, voice low and lethal. "This isn't over. Jamal thinks he's won. I'll show him what regret feels like." Ethan's plan took shape. He knew he couldn't face Jamal alone, not after last time. He needed numbers, a place with no interference, no cameras, no witnesses. This afternoon, after school, he hissed to his crew, eyes glinting, "Lure him to the shed out back, 4-on-1. I don't believe he'll get out." Dylan smirked. "Nice. Time to teach him a lesson." Caleb nodded, and Travis added, "No counterattacks this time." Ethan nodded, picturing Jamal on the ground, begging. It was the only way to reclaim his status, to remind Westwood who ruled. Meanwhile, Jamal barely noticed the newfound attention. He walked the halls with his usual calm, ignoring the praise and curious stares. But he wasn't dumb. He saw how Ethan's crew eyed him, not just anger, but a silent threat. Leela Monroe, his AP Physics classmate, grabbed him during break. "Jamal, be careful," she whispered, voice urgent. "I heard Ethan's pissed. He won't let it slide." Jamal shrugged. "Let him do what he wants. I'm not scared." But deep down, he knew Leela was right. Ethan wasn't the type to lose and let go. At noon, as Jamal ate his dad's lunch, fried chicken and rice, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the shed behind school, 4 p.m. No cameras. Let's settle this." Jamal stared at it, hand pausing midair. He didn't need to guess who it was. Ethan Pierce. He wanted a rematch. And this time, he wasn't playing fair. Jamal sighed, set the phone down, and gazed out the cafeteria window. He recalled his dad's words, "When you have to fight, make it count." He didn't want trouble, but if Ethan was forcing him into this, he wouldn't back down. Jamal kept his cool all through lunch, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He couldn't help recalling those quiet evenings in the backyard of their little Eastwood home, where under the old oak tree, his dad, Solomon, taught him to face pressure and fear. "When you're forced to fight," he'd said, voice deep like wind through leaves, "keep a cool head. Never let emotions steer your fists." Solomon didn't just teach him how to land a precise punch or flip an opponent, skills he'd used to drop Ethan in front of a stunned hallway, but something bigger, self-control, reading the situation, and never acting out of anger. Jamal knew Ethan wouldn't come alone. Dylan, Caleb, Travis, maybe even more would back him up. But he wasn't afraid, not because he was sure he'd win, but because he had something stronger than muscle, a quiet pride forged over years, and a lesson from his dad etched in his heart. Never bow to those who look down on you, no matter how many they are. During break, Leela Monroe pulled him aside near the lockers. His AP Physics classmate looked at him with worried eyes, whispering fast, "Jamal, I heard Ethan's rounding up his crew. He's planning something after school. Don't go alone, okay?" Jamal shrugged, replying calmly, "Thanks, Leela, but if he wants a fight, I'll handle it myself." Leela frowned, about to argue, but Jamal turned and headed to class. He didn't want to drag anyone into this, didn't want Leela or anyone else caught in his mess. This was between him and Ethan, and he'd face it his way. Meanwhile, near the football field in a hidden corner of Westwood Academy, Ethan Pierce huddled with his crew. He leaned against the fence, hands in pockets, his face still bruised from yesterday's fall. Dylan, Caleb, and Travis circled him, the air tense but charged with resolve. "Listen up," Ethan said, voice low and icy. "Today, 4 p.m., the shed out back." I texted him. 4-on-1. No way he's getting out. Dylan grinned. "Let me hit him first. He made you look bad yesterday." Caleb nodded, fists clenching. "Gotta show him who's boss." Travis, eyes sly, chimed in. "No comebacks this time. I'll hold his arms." Ethan nodded, imagining Jamal down, battered and begging. He didn't just want to beat him, he wanted to crush him, wipe out that cold stare Jamal had given him as he stepped over him in the hall. He'd planned it out. The shed was perfect, run down, isolated, no cameras, no one to step in. He knew Jamal would show, not because he was stupid, but because he was too confident, too cocky, thinking he could take them all. "He'll regret it," Ethan muttered, a chilling smile spreading. "I'll make the whole school see Jamal Carter's nothing but trash." But Ethan didn't know Jamal wasn't easy to break. On the bus home after school, Jamal sat by the window, watching Eastwood's dusty streets slide by. He didn't go straight home. He knew he had to prep. When the bus stopped near his place, he got off and headed to the backyard. Under the old oak, his dad's homemade punching bag still hung, swaying in the breeze. Jamal shed his hoodie, wrapped his hands, and started hitting. Each punch landed steady and strong, like a heartbeat. He wasn't training to show off or get even. He was training to stay sharp, to be ready for whatever Ethan brought. Solomon stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, watching his son with a thoughtful gaze. "Fighting again?" he asked. Not scolding, just curious. Jamal paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and said, "I don't want to, Dad. But that guy won't leave me alone." Solomon nodded, stepping closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Then make it count, Jamal. But don't let him turn you into something you're not." Jamal met his dad's eyes, nodding slowly. Solomon's words were a small flame inside him, a reminder that this wasn't just about fighting. It was about holding on to who he was. When the clock hit 3:30, Jamal left home, catching the bus back to Westwood Academy. He carried nothing but his beat-up backpack, and the calm his dad had drilled into him over years. He knew he was walking into a trap, knew Ethan wouldn't be alone, but he didn't back off, not because he wanted to prove something to the school, but because he couldn't let Ethan think he could stomp on him and his dad without paying a price. On the other side, Ethan and his crew were already at the shed behind the school. He stood in the dim space, the smell of old wood and dust rising around his feet. Dylan checked the door, Caleb stood watch, and Travis held a short wooden stick, smirking. "He shows up, he's done," Ethan said, voice brimming with confidence. The area around was dead quiet, just the soft wind rustling through dry grass, and the faint chirps of birds in the old oaks nearby. He knew he was stepping into a trap, but his eyes didn't waver. His dad Solomon's lessons rang in his head. "Keep your head cool, Jamal. Don't let them control you." The shed loomed ahead, an old weathered building with rotting wooden walls and a rusty tin roof, tucked behind the school's football field. The front door hung ajar, the darkness inside swallowing the last of the day's light. Jamal stopped in front of it, pushing it lightly with his hand. It creaked open, revealing the interior. The stench of aged wood and dust filled the air, faint light seeping through cracks in the roof, onto a stained concrete floor. He stepped in, his sneakers barely making a sound. As the door swung shut behind him, a voice cut through the shadows. "Coming here was a big mistake, Carter." Ethan Pierce emerged from a dark corner, his eyes black with anger. He wasn't alone. Dylan, Caleb, and Travis stepped out from the sides, boxing Jamal into a circle. Dylan smirked, hands in pockets. Caleb stood still, muscles tensed like he was ready to charge, and Travis gripped a short wooden stick, tapping it against his palm, like he was itching to use it. Jamal breathed evenly, his eyes scanning each one. "So this is it," he said, voice calm but cutting. "4-on-1, you that scared of me, Ethan?" Ethan's face twitched, like Jamal's words had jabbed an unhealed wound from yesterday's fall. "Shut up," he roared, stepping closer. "This isn't about fear. This is about teaching you your place." He tilted his head, a cold smile curling his lips. "Who do you think you are? Some janitor's kid trying to play king here?" Jamal crossed his arms, silent, locking eyes with Ethan. He'd heard this too many times. From Ethan, from others at Westwood Academy. But this time, it didn't shake him. He just found it funny. Funny that Ethan thought 4 guys would be enough to bring him down. Ethan signaled with his hand, and the fight kicked off. He lunged first, throwing a clumsy but powerful punch straight at Jamal's face. Jamal leaned aside, dodging it clean, feeling the breeze whip past his cheek. "Amateur," he muttered to himself, then struck back. A lightning-fast kick slammed into Ethan's gut, forcing him back, clutching his stomach, gasping. But Jamal got no break. Dylan rushed from the side, aiming a punch at his ribs. Jamal spun, blocking with his elbow, then snapped a counterpunch into Dylan's nose. A crack sounded. Dylan fell back, hands over his face, blood seeping through his fingers. Caleb and Travis didn't wait. Caleb, the biggest, charged like a bull, trying to wrap Jamal in a bear hug to pin his arms. Jamal ducked low, slipping out of reach, then swept his leg. Caleb stumbled, face planting the floor with a heavy thud. Travis leapt from behind, swinging the stick at Jamal's shoulder. But Jamal heard his steps. He turned, raised an arm to block, then yanked Travis forward, slamming an elbow into his chest. Travis groaned, dropping to his knees, the stick clattering away. All 3 lay scattered around the shed, moaning in pain. Ethan, just straightening up from the gut kick, charged again, eyes bloodshot. He threw wild punches, frantic, out of control. Jamal dodged each one, feet moving fluid, like his backyard bag drills. "You're done," Ethan snarled, swinging one last desperate punch. Jamal didn't dodge this time. He stepped in, caught Ethan's wrist, twisted, and fired a kick like lightning into his stomach. Ethan staggered, then Jamal grabbed his collar, yanked hard, and slammed him onto the concrete. Another thud rang out, dust swirling. Jamal stood tall, panting, staring down at Ethan beneath him. He clutched his gut, coughing hard, eyes wide with shock and agony. Dylan, Caleb, and Travis groaned from their corners, none daring to rise. The shed fell silent, just the labored breathing of the four beaten guys. Jamal leaned close to Ethan's face, voice low and deadly. "Don't ever touch me again." He straightened, wiped sweat from his brow, and walked out. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving Ethan and his crew in the dark, utterly defeated. Jamal wasn't badly hurt, but scrapes on his hands and heavy breathing told him it wasn't an easy fight. He stepped outside, the day's last light hitting his face, softening his sharp eyes. He wasn't proud of fighting, wasn't happy he'd dropped all four, but he knew he had no choice. Ethan had forced him, and he'd done what he had to, like his dad taught him, when you have to fight, make it count. Inside the shed, Ethan rolled to his side, clutching his stomach, face twisted in pain and disgrace. He watched Jamal's shadow fade through the door crack, hands trembling with rage. He'd lost again, worse this time. Dylan groaned. "He's too strong," Caleb rasped. "Didn't expect." But Ethan didn't answer. The next morning, Westwood Academy was ablaze with non-stop chatter. Word of the shed fight had spread everywhere, faster than the video of Ethan's hallway flop. No one knew who'd filmed the second clip, maybe a passing student, or a nosy kid, who'd heard rumors and snuck over, but it hit social media late that night, titled, "Ethan Pierce and Crew Humiliated Again at Westwood." The image of Ethan sprawled on the shed floor, clutching his gut, with Dylan, Caleb and Travis down around him, had officially buried the notorious bully's reputation. Jamal Carter walked into school with his usual calm, beat-up backpack on his shoulder, worn sneakers silent on the stone hallway. But this time, no one whispered behind him. The looks he got weren't judgmental or mocking. They were respect laced with a hint of fear. As he passed, the crowd parted like he was a new force no one dared cross. In the cafeteria, students clustered, buzzing. "You see the video? Jamal took out all four," one said, voice thrilled. "Swear he's a ninja or something." Another added, eyes wide. Lila Monroe, with her friends, watched Jamal from afar, smiling softly. "Told you, don't mess with Jamal." No one called him janitor's kid anymore. Jamal Carter's name rang like a legend through Westwood Academy's halls. Kids who'd ignored him now tried to chat. Some freshmen even swarmed him. "Where'd you learn to fight? Teach us." Jamal just shook his head. "I don't teach fighting." His refusal didn't faze them. They saw him as a symbol, not just for his strength, but for standing up to Ethan Pierce, the guy the whole school once feared. Ethan, meanwhile, showed up looking wrecked. His face was bruised, eyes shadowed, limping from the shed fall. He said nothing, head down as he shuffled through the hall, dodging stares. Dylan, Caleb, and Travis trailed him, but their old swagger was gone. They looked like whipped dogs, too ashamed to look up. Giggles followed Ethan. Whispers weren't hushed anymore. "Look at him. Thought he was hot stuff. Lost to Jamal twice now. What's left to flex?" Ethan gritted his teeth, fists tight, but he didn't act. He knew, starting anything with Jamal again, would just heap on more shame. During break, word of the fight reached the administration. Jamal got called to the principal's office, a big room with a wooden desk and diplomas on the walls. The principal, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, eyed him over the desk. "Explain this, Carter," he asked, voice stern. Jamal sat straight, replying coolly, "They attacked me first. I just defended myself." The principal frowned, but said nothing more. The video told the story. Ethan and his crew were clearly the aggressors. Jamal got a warning, no harsh punishment. The principal knew Ethan's family pull, But this time, even Richard Pierce couldn't shield his son from the truth. Back home in Eastwood, Solomon sat on the porch, coffee in hand as always. He eyed Jamal, spotting the hand scrapes, and asked, "Fighting again?" Jamal nodded, sitting beside him. "They forced me, Dad, 4 of them." Solomon sipped his coffee, gazing at the dusty street. "You win?" he asked, unsurprised. "Yeah," Jamal said, cracking a small smile. Solomon nodded, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Good, but don't let it make you cocky. Real strength's not in your fists, Jamal." He looked at his dad, nodding slowly. Solomon's words were a reminder. He didn't fight to brag, but to protect himself and his family's dignity. By day's end, Jamal's rep at Westwood Academy was solid. No one dared bully him anymore. Those who'd mocked him now shut up when he passed. Ethan, though, was finished. He wasn't king anymore, just a faded shadow of his old arrogant self, shunned by the school. The second video spread harder than the first, hitting tens of thousands of views online. Jamal Carter, Westwood's new legend, became the catchphrase. Some even dubbed him the new king, though Jamal never wanted it. Days after the shed fight, Westwood Academy found a strange new calm. Jamal Carter wasn't a whispered name anymore. He walked in with his beat-up backpack and worn sneakers, but now each step carried a different weight. Not arrogance, but quiet confidence. Students didn't eye him with judgment or scorn. They saw him as the guy who'd rewritten the rules, proving strength didn't come from money or status, but from within. That weekend, Jamal sat in the Eastwood backyard, under the old oak where he'd trained with his dad. Solomon stepped out from the porch, coffee in hand, settling beside him, on the creaky wooden chair. "You okay?" he asked, voice warm and low. Jamal nodded, watching the homemade punching bag sway in the breeze. "Yeah, I'm fine, but I don't like fighting, Dad. I just want to study and live quiet." Solomon sipped his coffee, studying his son with deep eyes. "Sometimes life doesn't give you a choice, Jamal, but how you handle it, that's what makes you who you are." He shared a story from his youth, about being looked down on for his skin, his janitor job, yet still holding his head high. "Real strength isn't in your fists," he said, resting a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "It's here." He tapped his chest, over his heart. Jamal nodded, feeling his dad's words sink in. He didn't fight to be Westwood's king. He did it to guard his pride, his dad's, and that of people like them. Folks Ethan Pierce once thought didn't belong there. At school, Jamal started something he'd never considered. He gathered a small group, teaching weaker kids self-defense, not to fight, but to stand up when pushed down. Lila Monroe joined first, grinning. "You're a good teacher, Jamal." Ethan Pierce, meanwhile, faded. He stopped stirring trouble, his resentful glares at Jamal gone. He slunk into the school's shadows, a ghost of his former self. The story ends one morning, as Jamal stood before Westwood Academy's gate. He eyed the iron entrance, with its fancy lettering, taking a deep breath. He didn't need the school's cheers or a legend title. He just needed to know he'd made it through. Not just Ethan, but the biases that once weighed him down. Back home, Solomon watched him from afar, a faint smile on his lips. He knew Jamal had learned the biggest lesson. There are some people in this world you just don't mess with. The story of Jamal Carter, in School Bully Targets, the black old man's son. 10 seconds later, he regrets everything. Mirrors much of life in the U.S. today, especially around discrimination, social pressure, and the power of personal resilience. Westwood Academy, an elitist private school in Atlanta, stands for places where class and racial divides still simmer. Jamal, son of Solomon, a black janitor from poor Eastwood, faces disdain from Ethan Pierce, a rich, powerful kid who embodies the unearned privilege some Americans enjoy. Jamal's fight isn't just physical, it's a symbol of the struggle many young people of color face in the U.S., pushing past prejudice to prove their worth. Ethan's constant janitor's kid taunts reflect the real class and racial bias still alive in modern America, especially in big cities like Atlanta, with stark wealth gaps. Yet how Jamal uses his dad's self-defense skills to drop Ethan, not with anger, but calm control, teaches the value of mastering yourself in tough times. The videos going viral in the story highlight today's tech, where injustice or personal wins can hit the public fast, pressuring society to shift. The takeaway: in today's America, stand firm like Jamal, don't let taunts from Ethans define you. Build skills, like Solomon taught Jamal with boxing, to protect your worth, but keep your cool as he advised. Real strength's not in your fists, it's in your heart. Don't chase crowd approval or social media hype. Focus on living true, like Jamal starting his self-defense group to help others. Ultimately, the story reminds us, even in an unfair world, you can spark change, not with violence, but with self-respect and meaningful action. If you love Jamal's stand against the bully and want more inspiring journeys like this, hit that subscribe button now. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with even stronger lessons.